Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. In the last tutorial we made it so NPCs would randomly spawn around you. Since then I've updated the meshes a little bit and added a few more varieties just to add extra to it. But in this tutorial what we're going to look at is actually customizing some rules for each NPC when they spawn. How often each faction should spawn, should they be spawned with any specific equipment, any inventory items, any gold, stuff like that. So let's get started. So we are branching off a tiny bit from the GTA section, purely because it fits the need that I have for it, but equally it's really easy to modify if you want to change your mind, because you don't have to follow all of it. So in GTA San Andreas there is actually a very limited number of pedestrians in the game, NPCs, and the difference between that game and my game is basically the time and the models they have. So for example, Male 01 here, he is just the standard guy that everybody's seen. He never changes clothes colour, skin colour, anything like that. He's always the same. And they have a lot of pedestrians on it. But if you've played GTA San Andreas before, or Vice City or 3, you know you see a lot of the same people a lot. So scrolling to the top, this girl here, or the guy in red here, you can sometimes see 3-4 of them in the same group of people, in the same area. That's mainly down to loading it in memory on the disk. So if you imagine you've got the disk running, it's going to load one model in and then keep reusing that model for the hardware it was generated. It's not going to load, how many's here? I think 256 different models into memory. The PlayStation couldn't have handled that. And there's a tweet somewhere by one of the developers who confirms this as well. So that's also why you see the same cars when you get one type of car, because that car's loaded in memory, it will just reuse that. We don't need to worry about that with modern computers unless we're going with, thousands of meshes, which we're not. So the difference between this one and my one is all of my models come with a bunch of different assets. They're modular, basically, to a point. So like I've got this Egyptian villager here. This Egyptian villager has the option of having up to 12 different skins on him to change what he looks like. So if I play C look, he's gone completely different now. He's got different cloak, different skin. If I apply D, he'll go a blue robe instead. And you can see as I go between them, they'll all completely change what colour robes they are and stuff like that. I can't remember the exact mod, but there was a mod released not long ago for San Andreas that basically takes the meshes and then gives them loads of different colour varieties as well. So you can see like the builder, you can have yellow, orange, yellow with an orange hard hat, and all sorts of different versions of that. You've got bikers with different colour hairs, you've got normal t-shirts. And that makes the game feel a lot more lived in, and it gives you more variety. There's another example of it, look. So you haven't just got the same red guy. You may know his same redness, like the mesh, but the colours will make it feel a bit different. And then the other option with mine is I have modular parts as well. So this guy here has, nothing, but I could come and find him some hair from his pack. So if I come to the attachments, I can give him some hair look. And then him walking around with hair versus him walking around without hair will kind of look like two different characters. And as well as we can also change the materials of both meshes. And if you really wanted, you could change the material of each individual mesh as well, but I'm not going to go that complicated on mine. So that's what I'm thinking we're going to do with the NPC spawner. We're going to create some new data assets where we can store each character's profile. So an NPC Egyptian, an NPC guard, elf, elven guard, night guard, for my game at least, and then you'll be able to recreate it for whatever versions you want in yours. And then I'm going to populate that profile with different things, like what meshes can this Egyptian have, what meshes can this guard have, what meshes can this one have, and then we can really customize the game. Of course, if you're working on a game where you've got specific named NPCs, or you don't want any of that fancy stuff, just create multiple blueprints for each version, just creating child versions, and then you can just spawn that and ignore the customization options. I'll try to remember to mention when that part is. So let's jump into it. So there are two ways you can do this. You can use a data table to do it, or you can use data assets. I'm going to opt in for data assets. Nothing wrong with data tables, you know I use them sometimes. The difference is a data table can only ever be edited by one person. So if you've got 3 artists on your team all trying to edit NPCs, only one of them is going to be able to use the data table at once. Whereas a data asset, you can load individual data assets and they're treated as separate actors. So if you've got an artist working on one gang and another artist working on another one, they'll never collide with each other, which is what I like. So in my blueprints folder, I'm going to come into my NPC spawner, and I'm going to right click and I'm just create a new folder, and I'll call this spawn profiles. Inside here I'm going to right click blueprint class, and I'm going to search for primary data asset. And I'm going to click select, and I'll call it PDA underscore NPC spawn profile, and I'll open it up. So in here it looks like a normal blueprint, but all we're going to do is add a bunch of variables for all the different stuff I want to basically have control over when I'm going to spawn the NPC. So for me, the first one I'm going to do is basically character meshes. This is what character mesh can this specific... Where's he gone? What character meshes does this specific NPC support? Now you might be thinking, decryption, why don't we just add it to that blueprint? And whilst that will work, that also means it'll be always loaded in memory, or if you use soft references, it means this guy's just got a bunch of different variables linked to assets and stuff that he only needs once. Unless he's going to be polymorphing into something else, you know, he walks through a door, bang, he's now a woman kind of thing, you don't need it. So I'm separating it away, separation of concerns. The data assets will handle it, and then they'll disappear. If you go from the Elven faction to the Knight faction, you don't need to worry about any of the Elven data assets anymore, so we can just get rid of them. That's the plan. So all my character meshes, I'm just going to come and select a skeletal mesh, but I'm going to choose skeletal mesh soft object reference. And then I'm also going to make it an array by right clicking on it, because then we get the option to add multiple ones to it. After this, I'm also going to come and add the character's materials, and this will be a type of material, but it will also be a soft object reference. And I'm just ticking the eyeball to make it instance editable. Now, depending on how your game works, you can add different properties here. So for mine, I want the faction in here, and it's going to be a single faction because that's all it'll be. So I can attach the faction to it. Then that just gives us the option that if we want to spawn an Egyptian in, but he's either an Egyptian guard faction or he's an Egyptian bandit, it gives us the option to really have that. But chances are it might stay the same. I'm going to add an inventory equipment variable where I'm going to store my narrative items, which I'm going to do a soft class reference for, so I can give them an inventory, because if you think of a game like Skyrim, different NPCs are spawned with different inventories. All the others kind of are the same as character meshes, where I'm going to do character hairs, glasses, and hats. You can of course spawn anything you want, you don't need to do any of the modular stuff like I've said either. I believe most of mine are also static meshes. So I'm going to change these to static mesh, soft object reference. And then the final one, which might be appropriate for you, is I'm going to give them a currency range. So I'm going to do gold range, because gold's the currency in my game. I'm going to make it a singular, but I'm actually going to do an int 32 range. And what this lets us do is set a min and max for how much gold this character can have. Which will be really nice when I randomly spawn them in, and if you spawn a shopkeeper in, you can give them a set range or something like that. But you might not want any of these, you might want some of them. It's entirely up to you. You might just get away with instead having a blueprint, which is fine. That works too. So now that we've got our spawn profile set up, let's set a couple of them up for these guys here. So I'm going to come into my blueprints NPC spawner spawn profiles. I'll right click miscellaneous data asset, and I'll just set the parent to, I'll just set the class to the NPC spawn profile. And I'm going to call this NSP for NPC spawn profile because it's easier. And I'll just type Egyptian generic. And I'll open it up. So then we've got a bunch of different variables we can populate. So the faction I can go straight off and I'll just say is an Egyptian. The meshes I can add. So the meshes are all the ones in here I can attach. So I'm going to add a filter here. So you can see at the side I've got my filters pre-done, which you can do just by clicking this little filters icon and ticking skeletal mesh. then I can see all the different skeletal meshes. So I'm going to select all of the standard ones, except the mummy guard. I'll not select the guards either, because they can be their own separate ones. So we've got the assassins, they can be fine. Villager, and I'll leave the others. And I'm just going to drag them into the data asset, and you'll see it'll highlight blue, then I can paste them all in. So that's the character meshes set up. The character materials, we can also do the same thing. So if I untick skeletal mesh and go to the materials section of my modular plugin at least, and I'm just going to select all of these different alts and add that into there as well. So these are material instances, so mine won't actually work. So I'm going to come and change mine over to a material instance. And it'll be the same soft object reference, compile and save, and then mine will let me up to there like that. There we go. I think it's better to use material instances for it, but yeah. So the cool thing about the way we've done this is these aren't actually loaded in memory. Even if we load the data asset, we have to specifically tell it to go and load this individual one, which you might think is quite extreme that we have to load all of them, but we don't. When we come in and we use this to change our character, we're going to randomly pick one out of here and only load that one. And then the same with the material. We're going to randomly load one and then only pick that one. And that's how we'll be able to build the character up nicely. So we've picked the faction. I'm not going to give him any inventory equipment or any hairs, glasses, hats. I can do that in my own time. Gold, I'll say he's got between 0 and 25. Why not? There we go. I can now compile and save that. And we've got one Egyptian's one here. So what I'm going to do is just fast forward the video now. And then I'll create a couple more. And then we can carry on editing it. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. So I've just created a bunch of different random ones. I haven't created every single one for my game, but I've created enough. It'll take some setup time initially, but then the randomization varieties that you can have is going to be insane. But that's what's going to make it feel just that much nicer. So now that we've got a bunch of data assets set up for our spawn profiles, you might think the next step is to go and modify the NPC spawner to use it. But I'm actually going to interject and add a little thing into it to make the customization and the rules options later a lot easier to do. So at the moment we have a list of NPCs that we want to spawn here. You could easily just add a list of data assets that you need to spawn. However, we were talking about doing territories at the beginning. So if you imagine this diagram again, we have generic NPCs all the way around these areas, but then these areas have specific NPCs to spawn in. So what I'm thinking is if we, instead of just using the spawn profiles per character, we also have another data asset that handles the territories or the groups of assets, then we can simply click on a territory and say, you spawn these guys. And then just with an event or a trigger, we can change what NPCs are spawning just like that. So it might sound a bit complicated, but if you imagine it, if I hide this one, if we have our NPCs here, so we have, NPC 1, NPC 2, and NPC 3, each one of them will have a spawn profile for when they're supposed to spawn. So we can go like that, and then these are shared with that one. And then at any moment we can say use this one. Or we can get rid of that and we can say use this one. Or what we'll do is we'll add an array and say you can actually spawn both of these, and we'll make our spawn logic look at it. And it'll make it really flexible and give us a lot of benefits to do it. So for example, take Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. If this one is your Ballers and this one is Grove Street, in Los Santos, in your area, if your territory is green, you will spawn this one. You have an area spawnable for the greens. But then you have an event that adds Ballers in because they're taking over the territory, so you can just add this to the current one as an override. If that doesn't make sense, we'll crack on with it. It's actually really simple. So, I'm going to come back to my spawn profiles folder, and I'm going to go back out to the NPC spawner. I'm going to right click and create a new folder called Area Spawnables. And I'm going to go into it. I'm going to create a new blueprint class, which is going to be a primary data asset, just like we just did. And I'm going to call it PDA underscore NPC area spawnable. And I'm going to open it up. So in here, I'm going to put a list of the spawnables that we can do. So I'm going to call it NPC spawn profiles. And this will be our type of our PDA NPC spawn profile. But I'm actually going to set it to a soft object reference. A soft object reference, so it's not loaded in memory either, because that's how cool it can be, really optimized. I'll make it instance editable. I'll add another one, and this will be the chance to spawn. And this is going to be how often are we going to spawn this NPC. And even better, we'll right click and make it an array. So how often are we going to spawn these NPCs? I'll make it a float. So this is going to be replacing the float that we've got here on the set. It'll replace that one there. But then it means you can have different areas doing different things. One extra I am going to add in, which I thought about whilst I was planning this out, is I'm going to add a max allowed of this NPC. And I'm going to set it to a type of integer. And the reason for this one is you very well could have it where you have an NPC like this one, where the 3 commoners are 80% chance to spawn and the guards are 1%. But maybe you don't want that many in there. So you want them to have the highest chance of spawning, but maybe you only want 20 of them maximum, so it's forced to spawn a minimum of 5 guards. Then what we can do on these 3, inside this spawnable, is say, you can only spawn 10 of these per chunk of NPCs. Another example is maybe you've got a named character you want to spawn sometimes, like a king. I have kings in my game. So we can say max allowed of this NPC, 1. There can only ever be 1 of those spawned in the area, and we can take advantage of that, which would be really cool. And that's pretty much all I'm going to do for this area spawnable. You can add more things into it if you want to add something to each individual NPC group, if you want, but we don't need to for now. So now we've got our area spawnable. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a data asset based on it. So I will search for the class PDA NPC area spawnable, and I will call it NAS, so NAS for NPC area spawnable, underscore, I'm just going to call this one generic. So this will be the generic lands in my game, crossing between villagers kind of thing. For the spawn profiles, I'm going to come in and add in the Egyptian generic, the night generic. So I'll say for these 2 here, the chances to spawn, I will say 80%, so 0.8. And the max allowed of this NPC, I'll keep as 0, and then what we'll do in the game is make it and say, if it's 0, don't do anything. And then I'll come and create another one of these. Instead of generic, I will call it Knights, and this will be specifically for the Knights village. So for this one, it's only going to have 1. That's it, and the most common one is going to be the Knights, like that. However, I'm going to add a Knights guard into it. And then this one, I'll assign my guards to it. I'll say this is a lower chance of spawning at 0.1. Actually, I'll do 0.2, mainly because it's in the night, so there's going to be more guards there. And we'll say max allowed of this NPC is 5. There can only ever be 5 of the guards at once, so you're not overwhelmed by it. Now, you might think we've just doubled up the NPCs here. And for these Knights and Knights guards, sure, that is a bit of a duplication. But for the generic variety here, imagine when you've got loads more profiles set up. So I've got my Egyptian generic, Knights generic, Bandits generic, Elven generic, Elven royalty, whatever else you've got, all the different NPCs. So basing on San Andreas logic, each of these individual characters will have an NPC profile for me. And we can add more stuff to it if we really want to, if we want to customize it. But then the areas, such as Los Santos, Las Vegas, will be our spawnable areas, which will control whether these do or don't. So for example, in the Knights pack, when you go to the city, the Egyptians aren't going to spawn there, because it's not marked as spawning that profile. And when we do look at doing the territories are going to be allowed multiple areas to add in as well. And that's where we can interject if you want, say, the ballers or an enemy gang attacking, you can just tell the territory you also temporarily spawn. So now that we've got the areas, let's go and modify our NPC spawner. Just a heads up, we're going to get a lot of errors when we do this, but we are going to slowly fix them as we do it. And that's just what happens when we change data types, but that's okay. So, NPCs to spawn, instead of BP NPC, I'm actually going to come and change it to our PDA NPC area spawnable, and I'm going to set it to a soft object reference, and I'm going to change the variable type, and it says it will break it. That's completely fine, we can just ignore that. And I'm also going to change it from a map to an array, and it'll say, do you want to change it again? Click yes, that's fine. And if we click off it and click back on it, if we hit compile, it'll reset the default value, so that's fine. Let's just add in a couple of areas, so we'll say generic, and we'll say you can also spawn some knights. So for this one, I'll just add in generic for now. So then, if we come down to our spawning logic event, inside our randomly get NPC function, you'll see there's a bunch of errors now, but that's completely okay. So instead of getting the keys to the array, we can simply just call shuffle on it, because we don't need to worry about it anymore. Then, off of the NPCs to spawn, I'm going to drag off and I'm going to do for each. And this is where we're going to run into a small issue. Something that I kind of planned for, but I was hoping to get around it, is we can't actually get any variables from this area. Which means we're going to have to load the area in memory to get the variables and then deload it from memory. So every time we want to spawn an NPC, we're going to have to load this array of NPC area spawnables, which isn't going to be fantastic. So what I'm actually going to do is come and change this NPCs to spawn to an object reference instead, and I'll change the variable. Now, it does mean there's going to be a tiny bit more loaded in memory, but it's not going to be that much, since everything in here is already async anyway. It's nothing large. And we can test this in a moment. So if we fix this NPC, if we shuffle the new object version, and then we can for each off of this one, let's just fix a couple more of the issues, then we can check the memory footprint and see if it's still going to be good. So instead of getting the random ball with weight from the find, we can just drag off of this, and we can get chance to spawn, and we can plug that in instead. Then if we are happy to do so, and we can get our NPC spawn profiles, and then we can just get a random one off of the array profiles, and we can return that instead. So I'm going to connect that to the return node. I'm going to delete the chosen NPC off and rename this to chosen profile. Then I'm going to come back to our event graph, and we're using it here. As you can see, it's not liking it. So I'm going to drag off of this and tell it to async load the asset instead of the class. And we can plug that into should spawn, completed. And then instead of resolving that, we can resolve the data asset, and then we can spawn it from here. So now that we've fixed the errors, before we continue, let's just go back to the NPC spawner. You can see I've added a default value of that data actor there, that if we come to it and right click and choose size map, it will tell us the size of that odd memory, and it's only 9 megabytes. So it's absolutely tiny. And the biggest part of it is actually the NPC that we're already storing in memory there, the spawned NPCs. Because we need to store them so we can get rid of them when they've spawned, or when they've despawned or died or whatever. So that is absolutely massive. If you look at this down here, the PDA, that's our area spawnable one down there. It's absolutely tiny. I don't even think it'll tell us how big it is. But even if I come and add more of them to it, so I just keep hitting duplicate, just add a bunch of them. I can even come and add in the other ones as well. If we hit compile and save now, and refresh the size map by closing it and reopening it, you can see it's still absolutely tiny. There's nothing to it small. So this entire thing is 9.5 megabytes in memory with everything loaded. That's how tiny it is. So we're really, really good for optimization on that. So let's just bin all these off and just put the generic one back in. So one thing that we have missed is we don't actually know which class we need to spawn on the NPC profile. We have all the meshes and everything, so if I type get, down at the meshes, glasses, blah, 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 but we don't actually have the core blueprint. And mine do have different animations for each one, so I need different blueprints. So what I'm going to come and do, so back on my PDA spawn profile, I'm going to add a base class. And this class is going to be a type of BPNPC because all my NPCs adhere from that. I'm going to set it to a soft class reference and we'll put it right at the top, so that'll be the first thing you set. But then everything inside of it can be customized inside that. So if I come and open this one here, this Egyptian, and I'll come and set it to the basic Egyptian generic one there. And I can do that for each one of these. You very well may have the same one, and that's completely okay too. But with mine, each one's subtly different or has enough differences with it that it can warrant being a child blueprint, which is completely fine with me because we don't load it all in memory anyway. And then royalty, I believe that's the same one as the previous one, so I'll just do nice for that for now. There we go. But now we have a specific class to use. Back on our spawner, we can come and get that class. We can get the base class. And of course we do have to async load it, but that's completely okay. We're going to be doing that quite often. So we'll async load that class, we'll plug it into the completed, and then we'll resolve this, just like we did previously, and we'll connect that to the class here. I am going to come and make some space here because we're running out quite rapidly. There we go. And I'll come and plug all this in nice and neat down here. And that'll now spawn the NPC specifically. It won't apply any of the customization logic at the moment, but let's give it a try and see if everything's working the way it should so far. So if I spawn it now, we should have a random assortment. There's an Egyptian, so he's walking around. There we go, we've got an Egyptian, we've got a knight barman. And they'll all be the same, so this is not applying any character mesh or material changes at the moment. So we're okay. But it is indeed working, and it's spawning a variety of them, which is nice. And they're all disappearing when they get out of range. We can increase the range later. Awesome. So let's crack on with the customization aspect of it now. So once we've spawned them and it's valid, we're going to add them to the tracker and let them be. But then after this, we can now start modifying them and loading in the parts we need. So in order to make this a bit neater, I am going to promote this spawn profile to a variable. And I'll call it current spawn profile. And I'm going to set it to private, so nothing else can use it. And I'll put it in a private category. We would just normally make this a function. However, we need to do a lot of async spawning, and we can't do that from a function. You can only do that. So if I promote it to a variable, it means we don't have to drag from that one node over and over and over again. We can literally just use the variable. And then at the end, we'll just clear the variable. So now that we've got the NPC here, so let's start by setting their skeletal mesh. So what I'm going to do is get our current spawn profile, and I'm going to get the list of meshes, so the character meshes. And then I'm going to randomly get one, so random array item. And then from here, I can async load the asset. And then I can also resolve it just under it. I can connect that back to the add. Put this in a nice, neat place here. And then I'm also going to promote the actual spawned character to a variable so we can use it. So I'll call this one current spawned character, and we'll make this also private so nothing else can use it. The reason we're marking it as private is if anything else tries to use this NPC spawner, some of the variables they'll want to modify, such as the NPCs to spawn, the max allowed spawns, you may want to modify those from a different script. However, the current spawned character or the current spawn profile, you're not going to want to modify, because that's just temporary code that we're using to make it neater for us. So we're going to ignore that. So back on over here, now that we can drag our current spawn character in, we can set the skeletal mesh asset on the mesh, like so. We can connect it to the completed, and we can connect the new mesh like so. So that, if we comment that, set random body mesh. So one last fix we're just going to do for something that caught me out on the holiday one, is we just need to tell the current spawn character that they are mobile. They can be moved around. They don't need baked lighting on them anyway, since they are going to be moving around. So I'm just going to come and set the mobility of the mesh that we're changing. And we'll plug it in like so. And I'll make sure it's set to movable. I'll come and expand this out so we've got a bit more space. Equally, if you don't want to have to set everything to movable, maybe you've got performance concerns, maybe you have a special lighting rig that means you can't do it fully, then equally you can just create a separate blueprint per variety of character you want, and instead of doing this bit here, you can just randomly spawn that in. It takes a bit more prep work up front to create all the varieties, but it might be a lot easier for you. So if I start it now, you should see that we get some odd behaviours. So one of the oddities about my specific modular packs is for some reason they're using different rotations. I don't know why. I think it's a new standard that Cynthia rolling out. So you can see this one over here has spawned completely fine. She's a knight blueprint and she's using a knight mesh. This one over here is an Egyptian and she's using the Egyptian. However, this one is a knight using an Egyptian pack. So the first thing is, it is this timer calling this multiple times before it's finished its setup, which is fine. So I'm actually going to untick that as looping, and I'm still going to keep it as a variable. Then it's going to come in here, and after it's loaded the asset here, instead of using the base class here, I'm simply going to plug it in to the set variable. So we've got a fixed point in memory, if you wish. Drag it back a bit to make some space. And now that we've stopped the timer from looping, so it'll only spawn one NPC, and we're using the cached versions instead of trying to re-resolve it, just make sure we've always done that down here. Yeah, we seem to have done. At the very end, what I'm going to do is clear out the 2 temporary variables because we needed to do that anyway. But then I'm also just going to recall timer setup, which tells it to come back up to here and reset the timer. So we're basically telling it to loop, but only after it's finished processing the NPC. So it means you could technically wait like 5 seconds after telling it to spawn an NPC and it wouldn't matter. It's not going to get confused. But you'll see now that we've done those fixes, that the NPCs all spawn correctly. So you can see there's the bartender for the Knights pack. There's so many of them now. This one, I've got no idea. It's something to do with Egyptian, something to do with more Egyptian knights. They're all randomly spawning. And look how much variety we've got already. What are you? You're a prince, I believe, aren't you? With a monobrow. There's a nun from the Knights pack. But you can see the variety already is taking a hold. And we haven't done this many blueprints. The game is taking over this for us. But we can go one step further with the materials we've added as well, and we can also change them all to change. Because as you can see, we've got like, 7 different characters? And you can see a few duplicates, not many, but there are duplicates around. So, if we come back to our NPC spawner, right at the end, after we've spawned the random body mesh, we'll just comment these fixes that we've done, end of character spawning, and we'll just put this down here just temporarily. And now that we've done this, we can basically copy this and paste it over here, and we're going to change all the assets over to instead use the material. So instead of set a random body mesh, we can go set a random body material. We don't need to set the mobility because we've already done it. So instead of just the mesh, I can also go and get the hair. And basically any material you want to change the hair of, you'll do it here. We'll take these and put them over here for when we're going to use them in a moment. Then the current spawn profile, instead of the character meshes, we can get the materials. So get character materials. We can random over them. Delete these off because we don't need them anymore. And then we can load the asset like so. We can resolve the material. And then we should be able to simply drag our 2 variables in down here. And off of the mesh, we can just do set material and plug in our new material light. If you have complicated characters like a metahuman or a CC4 character where you have multiple meshes, then you potentially might have to create multiple variables per index. So you have a index 0 mesh material, index 1 material, index 2 material if you want to. Mine are all just singular materials, so it's nice and easy. Little tip as well, we can connect multiple targets into the same one. We don't have to do set material, set material, set material. You can just plug them both in. And then finally, if we just link this all the way back to the body and drag these all the way across. And instead of body, because we are just setting a random material. If you do want a random material for the hair compared to the body, just do this step and then just do hair separately and then you'll get a random one. But there we go. And then we can add the character spawning to the end of it like so. And this time, ladies and gentlemen, if we try it now, they should have completely random materials too. So you can see we are getting them with completely random materials. See, because he's got blue pants, he's got white pants, and they're the same mesh. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. How cool is that? We've got a lot of random characters now walking around. Imagine if you were in a city, just having these walk around, specifically regions. That would be very cool. So for the rest of the customizations that we have, so I have all the inventory equipment, hairs, glasses, hats, it's basically the same thing. So on the NPC spawner, we set a random body mesh, we set a random material. So depending on how your characters are built up, at least in my version, my NPCs already have all of the static meshes there that they need, and it just contains nothing. So you can just allocate to those static meshes, and just like we did for the body, set the static mesh. It's that simple. And if you don't have them already there, then you can simply use the spawn actor from class node and then join off of it and use the attach actor to component and attach it to your body mesh. And it's really that simple to do. For the inventory, I'm just going to get the character's inventory that I've built using narrative inventory, and I'll loop over and set the items on it. For the gold, I will do the same thing for the inventory, and it's that simple, ladies and gentlemen. That's how we can do it. I'm going to finish the tutorial up, and I'm going to go and create the rest of my areas, the rest of my profiles, and finish the extra customization spawn things here, and then that's going to be it. In the next tutorial, we're going to look at pooling the NPCs together. So as we destroy an NPC, we'll just make it invisible and deactivate it and temporarily hold it in memory, and then we will reuse that NPC if it exists for a small period. So that just means we're not destroying and creating the same NPCs loads of times if we can just reuse them. It's going to be a small optimization technique, but it'll be a good one. It's widely known as a good thing to do pooling when you've got a lot of things. And then we'll do some more work on the rule system. But there we go, ladies and gentlemen. So if we try it now, we should start to see okay. We'll start to see NPCs.
Hey, you. Come over here.
What? Wait, how did you get here?
Hey, do you need help growing your business? Let me tell you about today's sponsor.
Lemmy. If you're feeling overwhelmed by technology, want to grow your business in the digital world, or just need general IT advice, then check out Lemmy. They offer personalized consultations, creative design, and tailored digital solutions to help you thrive. With a free consultation, you have nothing to lose, but everything to gain. So let them bring your digital challenges to life. Visit them at lemmyu.com to get started now. Our randomly spawned NPCs. They now change meshes and materials, and they all look... Oh, there's a princess there. It's Princess Peach. Look. There we go. Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. If you've got any improvements, what you'd like to see, please let me know. We're making great progress on this system now, and soon it will be populating entire cities. So thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this helped. If you've got any issues, please let me know below. My name is Decryption, and I will see you next time.